Oh, that racist Constitution and race in America in general. Those are the topics of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And before I get into the topic of discussion, I want to quickly mention that you can get Bold and Blunt now at edify.app. That is the online platform for faith-based podcasts. Of course, you can still get Bold and Blunt at washingtontimes.com and anywhere podcasts are offered. U.S. Constitution, quote, racist and sexist, end quote. Most Democrats believe. That is a mid-July 2022 Rasmussen Reports poll, which I'm going to read because it just goes to the heart of America's troubles. The U.S. Constitution is overwhelmingly admired by American voters, but most Democrats believe our national charter is tainted by racism and sexism. I wonder where Democrats get that idea. Could it be from Democrats and their water carriers in the media, or could it be because of the infusion of socialists into our public school system and these socialists forcing their socialist rot onto the minds of our youngest and most innocent? You know, the ones who graduate and go on to become America's next generation of leaders in politics, government, business, and so forth. A new national telephone and online survey by Rasmussen Reports, back to reading this piece, and the Heartland Institute finds that 82% of likely U.S. voters have a favorable opinion of the Constitution, including 58% who have a very favorable view of the document, which was ratified in 1789. Just 14% view the Constitution unfavorably. So that's the spot of good news in this survey. And I have to say, Heartland Institute, which I used to write for regularly, is a great organization headquartered in Chicago. They're libertarian in ideology, libertarian sort of in bent, but they are fantastic at covering issues related to climate change in particular and the environment. But they also do a really good job of covering all sorts of free market advocacy issues. So 82% likely U.S. voters have a favorable opinion of the Constitution. Still, there's that sticking point. Democrats, which is what, half of America align themselves with the Democrat Party, give or take, believe our Constitution is tainted by racism. Let's go on and dissect this summary from Rasmussen's polls. Majorities of every political category, 89% of Republicans, 74% of Democrats, and 80% of independents have at least a somewhat favorable opinion of the Constitution. Again, that's pretty good. Could be better with Democrats and independents. Could even be better with Republicans. Only 89% of Republicans have at least a somewhat favorable view of the Constitution. Should be 100%. Anyhow, although Rasmussen writes, although more Republicans, 76%, than Democrats, 42%, or independents, 56%, have a very favorable view of the Constitution. Well, I'll put myself in that 76 very favorable view of the Constitution category. Now, for the money quote. Despite their generally favorable opinion of the Constitution, however, 57% of Democrat voters agree it is, and here's the quote, a document rooted in racism, and 64% think the Constitution, here's the quote, is a sexist document that gives men advantages over women, end quote. Nearly half, 49%, of Democrats believe the Constitution, quote, should be mostly or completely rewritten, end quote. And it should be noted, Rasmussen finds, that the rest of the electorate overwhelmingly rejects all these statements. All these statements being the Constitution rooted in racism, the Constitution is a sexist document, and more alarmingly, the Constitution should be mostly or completely rewritten. I credit the public school systems, the media, and the leftists, the far leftists, the Marxist, the collectivist element that has taken over the Democrat Party with bringing forward such sad and sorry statistics. Look, if we consider the Constitution racist, sexist, and in complete need of overhaul, in need of replacing, then where does that leave our country? This isn't just a matter for the political world to vote on. It goes to the culture of America. The big point of American exceptionalism, and Founding Fathers put this forth in the Declaration of Independence, which was a sort of roadmap to the development of the Constitution, to the writing of the Constitution. The big point of American exceptionalism is, in a phrase, God-given. God-given individual rights. And so that's not simply something that the political bodies in America vote on and that is shifted with each winds of election, with Democrats pushing this way and Republicans pushing that way. It's basically the inherent quality that all citizens in America have as a condition of being an American citizen. Rights. They come into this world, they're born into this world with certain unalienable rights. Among life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Endowed by our Creator. It's not something that should go to vote. What should go to vote, what the politicians decide on, is how to uphold those inherent rights of the citizens that come from God. Maybe Democrats have a particular preference for upholding those God-given rights this way versus Republicans have a particular game plan of upholding those God-given rights that way. But that should be the only difference in the political system among the political parties, how they accomplish, how they preserve and protect rights that are guaranteed each and every citizen in America by God. So when you look at a poll like this, when you look at a survey like this Rasmussen report survey, and you see findings that show almost half, let's just say half, 49% is half of Democrats believe the Constitution should be mostly or completely rewritten. This is not just a political battle here. This is a societal battle, a cultural battle, because it tells me that at least half of Democrats aren't understanding American exceptionalism, and they're not willing to fight for it because they point to the Constitution as the problem in America, whereas the real problem in America is that Americans have turned away from God. And so the concept of God-given individual rights is being eroded on a daily basis. It's a terrible poll. It's a terrible showing. And I have to say that even the Republicans supporting the Constitution is not as high as I would like to see, 89%. Somewhat favorable opinion of the Constitution. Shame on you, Republicans. Shame on you for not taking an even stronger stand for American exceptionalism and rule of law and limited government. Maybe that's why, because Republicans have strayed away from that concept of limited governance to almost the same degree Democrats have. Republicans are starting to be as elite by way of a party as Democrats have become. Whatever the problem is, the idea that our Constitution is racist, sexist, and in dire need of abolishing and replacing is a clear, frightening sign that America's last days may be upon us. the Democrats have successfully driven race into about every talking point that pops in America. And if we don't stop dividing so the Democrats can come in and conquer, we're not going to have any country left standing in the end. And I have a guest today who has, coincidentally enough, written a book about this very same topic. His name is Dr. Ben Carson. His book is called Created Equal: The Painful Past, Confusing Present, and Hopeful Future of Race in America. And I'd like to focus on that very first title, Created Equal, because here in America, that's what we are. And when inequalities exist, we still strive for equality, which is very different from the equity that the Democrats like to talk about these days. But to my guest, Dr. Ben Carson, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really do appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Congratulations on your newest, Created Equal: The Painful Past, Confusing Present, and Hopeful Future of Race in America, making the New York Times bestseller list.
Yes, we're very pleased. I wrote that book because I was noticing that we're in a cycle where everything seems to be circling back around to race, in most cases inappropriately. And, race is being used as a cudgel to beat people into submission, to make white people feel guilty, to make black people and minorities feel like victims. And it's being used in a very destructive way. There are a lot of wedges that are being driven between the people in our society. Race is probably the biggest one, the easiest one to use, but also age, religion, political affiliation, income, gender, all these things are being used to drive wedges between us. And I want people to understand that, yes, we've had some problems in the past, as every society that is inhabited by human beings has had. There are those on the left who want to make it seem like America is uniquely evil because we had slavery. But as we point out in the book, slavery has been a scourge on virtually every society since there's been written history. And there are actually more slaves in the world today than there have ever been at any point in time. When you look at human trafficking, and who is the number one consumer of that human trafficking? The United States of America. So we don't have to go back 200 years to dredge up something horrible. There's horrible stuff going on right now that we need to deal with. But if there is something unique about America and slavery, it is the fact that we were the only country that was willing to fight a bloody civil war and lose a large portion of our population in order to end the scourge. So that's what we need to be teaching our children. Our Constitution and our values move us toward freedom if we will simply observe them. And then, there are those who say that we haven't made a lot of progress racially. What about your nonsense? Just in my lifetime, as I point out in the book, when I was a kid, we used to all get excited when a black person came on television in a non-servile role. You called everybody into the living room, "Wait, look at this." And, today, there are black admirals and generals and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and heads of foundations and university presidents, including Ivy League. We've elected a United States president twice. We have a black vice president. I mean, the list goes on. And it's totally absurd to say that we haven't made any progress. We haven't reached nirvana. There's no question about that. And we should continue to move forward. But, we have to make a decision. Do we want to base our future on our past failures or on our great success?
The problem, Dr. Carson, is that there are too many people who look back on the fact that America had slavery at its founding and use that to justify that therefore our Constitution is inherently racist and needs to be abolished. And how do you thoughtfully and effectively counter that?
Again, you go back and you look at what is happening. You look at the facts, not at the allegations. What are the facts? What country in the world has provided so much success for people and so many opportunities for people and such a high standard of living? That would not be possible if we had a rotten system. And we sit here and we talk about how it's systemically racist and certain people just can't get a break here. If that were the case, why would people be forming caravans trying to get in here? And when they got here, wouldn't they call all their relatives and friends and say, "Don't come here, this is a horrible place"? That's not happening. So, you have to look at what your eyes are seeing, listen to what your ears are hearing, what your heart is telling you. And a lot of people on the left, they say, "No, don't believe your eyes and your ears, just listen to us, we'll tell you what to think."
Now, to what degree do you see the public school systems in America in recent years contributing to the division that we're seeing over race and truthful history in America?
Well, they're contributing quite a bit. 60 years ago, Nikita Khrushchev told the white David Eisenhower that your grandchildren's children will live under communism, and we won't have to fire one shot. And what did he know? He knew that all you had to do was gain control of the school system so you could indoctrinate the kids. We've known for a long time, society has known for a long time, how impressionable young children are. The Bible in Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he'll not depart from it." Even our enemies, Vladimir Lenin, Marxist, said, "Give me your children to teach for 4 years, and the seed that I sow will never be uprooted." So they knew what they were doing and capturing the public schools, and that's been going on for 60 years. We have just become aware of it because of the scrutiny that took place with the COVID lockdown.
Yes.
And that turned out to be a blessing in disguise, so we could find out some of the things that the students were being taught. But it's a good thing, because now all of a sudden you've got all these parents and parent groups that are standing up, that are coming out of the corner where they had their head down and hope nobody called them a name, and they're getting involved, and they're running for the school boards, and they're asking for accountability. And I think that will make a big difference in the way that things are done. But the public schools also need to be challenged like anything else. That's why we need to really push for school choice. Because if they're not challenged and if they have no consequences, why would they do anything different?
I assume that you talk about some of the backlash that you just described parents are having against public school systems as part and parcel of your hopeful future take of race in America. But when you look around and you see things like Black Lives Matter and Antifa, thuggery in the streets, how do you, as a patriotic American, see effectively changing the hearts and minds of these type of protesters and activists? Or are they just a lost cause?
Well, many of them have been indoctrinated. There's no question about that. And it takes a lot to change somebody who's indoctrinated. So I think really that the concentration has to be, on the new impressionable generation.
Right.
And, that's why at American Cornerstone Institute, which I head up, we're a think tank and a do tank. That means we do stuff like we create the Little Patriots program, which has an online lessons for K through 5, teaching the real history of our country and the value system. And it's all done free of charge. We have underwriters to underwrite the program. Beautiful cartoon illustrations, Disney, Pixar, ABC Kids animators who were not woke people, by the way, that we got to do these. And also we've created books, one called Why America Matters, a new one that just came out this week called Red, White, and Blue, Our Flag Matters to Me and You. And really helping our children to understand who we are as a nation, because a lot of that is just not being taught appropriately in our schools anymore.
And talk about the link between a thriving church community and a thriving faith-based community and the ability to secure America's freedoms going forward.
Well, in 1831, when Alexis de Tocqueville came to America to study our nation, because the Europeans were just so fascinated, they couldn't understand how a fledgling nation, barely 50 years old, was already competing with them on every level. And de Tocqueville was going to clarify what was going on, so he came over and he looked at our government, duly impressed with our system of checks and balances, looked at our businesses, was very impressed with the entrepreneurship and innovation created by the atmosphere that we fostered, looked at our educational system, was blown away. He could find a mountain man in the middle of the forest who could read and could tell him about our founding documents. But the thing that impressed him the most were our churches and the fiery sermons that came out of those pulpits that gave a ragtag bunch of militiamen the fortitude to defeat the most powerful military force on earth, and gave the people a sense of morality and a base for going forward. And that faith, those Judeo-Christian values, drove us as a nation. Those values say, love your neighbor, not cancel your neighbor if they don't agree with you, not hate them if they have a different yard sign than you do. So those kinds of things played a tremendous role in the rapid formation and advancement of our country.
And I'm just going to throw this out there. It's not really related to your book, but I know that you are a man of faith. There are many church leaders around the nation who are preaching and teaching at this moment in time that America is on the downslide, and this is because largely of the sins that Americans have allowed to go forward, and we are in our last days as a nation. I wonder if you could respond to that.
I can understand why people might think that, and it certainly does look like we're moving in a downward direction. But that doesn't mean that we can't correct that. I think America is very different from a lot of other nations, different from Cuba, for instance. And our people are not going to simply lay down and take it. And, if the government, tries to force them, they're going to fight back. They're not going to submit. And, I think sometimes it's darkest before the dawn. It's pretty dark right now as, a lot of our values, a lot of our freedoms and things we take for granted are being challenged. But this is America. And I firmly believe that we will spring back from this and be even stronger, and that we're going to learn from these things that are going on right now. We're going to learn from COVID. We're going to learn from the mandates. We're going to learn from all of this stuff what we should and should not do. And the people are waking up in droves. Everywhere I go around the country, I see people actually realizing what's going on.
I do too, and thank you for saying that. That actually got my heart going a little bit. I love hearing the words of optimism for America. And so just to finish up with one question along those lines, if you had to summarize your hopeful future of race in America, that portion of your book, in just a line or two, just a minute or two, how would you summarize that?
I would summarize it as just what I just said. People are actually beginning to open their eyes and see what's going on. Even some people in the news media are starting to recognize that, the continuation of this very progressive, let's fundamentally change America motif is not working for us. And that's sort of the spearhead. And that's going to help us to really turn the ship around. So I think it's very hopeful. And in terms of race, it's just a matter of people recognizing that we don't have as much of a race problem as those who are trying to divide us want you to think. I mean, the changes are just so massive. It's almost ridiculous to sit there and say that things have not gotten any better.
That's wonderful words of wisdom. Thank you. Thank you for your discernment. Thank you for writing this book, Created Equal, The Painful Past, Confusing Present, and Hopeful Future of Race in America by Dr. Ben Carson, always hopeful for America. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Take care now.
You too. Honestly, we can't talk about this topic enough in America from the angle that Dr. Carson presents, Created Equal. Democrats are all about dividing America into little segments of society that they can then pit against each other. And then when everybody's at war with each other, the Democrats can use that chaotic situation to justify coming in, swooping in, and pretending to be the solution for what ails society. Well, in a country where our government recognizes, or is supposed to recognize, the fact that we are all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, warring factions has no place. Put the blame on Democrats, but keep the discussion going about created equal. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app. That is the online platform for faith-based podcasts. You can get it at washingtontimes.com. You can subscribe to Bold and Blunt at washingtontimes.com and to my 3 times a week newsletter that contains all the commentaries I write all day long at Washington Times. Just go to washingtontimes.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, find the newsletter section, click on my name, and sign up for my Monday, Wednesday, Friday newsletter that contains my Bold and Blunt podcast plus my commentaries. And if you don't want to do that, you can always get Bold and Blunt wherever fine podcasts are offered. And one quick note, pick up a copy of my latest book, Lock Down the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. It's an eye-opener, and it'll tell you more of how the Democrats are busily working to destroy America. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for supporting Bold and Blunt. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.